morning, good afternoon and good evening, depending on where in the world we find you today. Welcome to the fifth and final webinar in our series, covering the effects of COVID-19 on the packaging and processing industries. My name is Marek Szandrowski and I'm the brand director at Informa Markets with responsibility for the ProPack portfolio of processing and packaging trade shows across China, India, Southeast Asia and Egypt. Many thanks as ever go to Pierre Pienaar and the World Packaging Organization for our collaboration on this project, as well as the Australian Institute of Packaging and Nerida Kelton for your energy and enthusiasm in formulating the agenda for the series. Today's topic is the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on global supply chains. Once countries began to lock down, some shortages in the initial phase at least were linked to breakdowns in supply chains. Going forward, the pandemic has also raised questions over our reliance upon global supply chains, particularly on single sourcing of components, materials and products. Subsequently, this could potentially lead to more positive developments of domestic production and the acceptance and introduction of Industry 4.0 within manufacturing processes. To discuss this topic in many of its aspects, I'm delighted to be able to welcome an international panel of experts from right across the globe. Today's moderator, as always, is Pierre Pienaar, WPO President. Our distinguished speakers include Simon van Leuven, Director of Vanden Recycling from Australia, Gian Paolo Crasta, Deputy General Manager Uchima, based in Milan, and Alan Adams, Sustainability Director for APAC at Sealed Air, based also in Melbourne. I'd also very much like to welcome the more than 600 participants from all over the globe we have attending here today. We would very much like this session to be as interactive as possible, so please get involved by submitting questions via the Q&A tab, and when you do so, please state your name and the country from where you are attending. Just before starting, I'd like to say a couple of words on the ProPack shows. Although it's not possible for us to attend in person, I am very pleased to say that ProPack Asia is now live. The show opened yesterday and is running until the 23rd of October in Bangkok at Bitech. This webinar is part of this year's hybrid event that we've organised, so a lot of content is online and in parallel to the physical event taking place in Bitech. Check out the ProPack Asia website for more details of all the events that are happening. I'm also very pleased to say that preparations are going well for our second flagship event, which will be taking place next month in Shanghai, ProPack China. So if you're based in China and would like to come along, please make sure you come along to that one. Without any further ado, I'd like now to hand over to Pierre Pienaar, President of the World Packaging Organization, and our guest panels.
A very good day to all of you out there across the world, and we've got viewers and listeners from practically every country around the world. As Marek said, and thank you for the intro, Marek, we have 650 odd that are potentially online as we talk. So thank you very much for joining us today. We have an exciting lineup and I'm really pleased. No, I'm not pleased that it's coming to an end. I'm pleased because of the panel that we have. These are experts in their field, a very cross-section, very dynamic, and they're right on top of their game. And I encourage all of you to ask as many questions as you can. In fact, let's challenge these speakers and experts and see if they can answer every question to your satisfaction. So thank you very much for coming online today. So my first speaker is Simon van Leuven. He is the director of Van Leuven Recycling, and he hosts various podcasts. So he's quite often on various platforms. So he's used to this sort of thing. So challenge him as much as you can. They certainly are global leaders in their field. And they have about 100 end users in over 20 odd countries, and they handle, this is phenomenal, they handle over 100 grades of various scrap plastic. So without any further ado, Simon, over to you.
Thank you very, very much for the warm welcome, Pierre. It's a real pleasure to be here and be part of this today. And wherever you are in the world, on behalf of our Vanden family, we hope you are all keeping safe and you're able to go about things as safe as you can. I'm going to just bring up my PowerPoint on screen. Obviously, during 2020, this has been a time of change and adapting for all of us. And I just kind of want to walk you guys very quickly through how we've been able to continue to assess recycled plastic through the global supply chain in 2020. And one of the things about our business is our role is to provide certainty, not only for suppliers who supply us the raw feedstock, but also for our manufacturing partners and our customers, or the end users, as you might say. So we've all had to adapt, and I just thought that perhaps this might be something relevant to all of us when we want to think about how we have to adapt to the new way of the way we go about our business. And if there's not anything more that we can think about, it would be "you are on mute" being the quote of 2020. And I'm sure as all of us have had to adapt, we've all felt like this at times. So what are some of the things that have changed in 2020? Well, we certainly have to look at our entire supply chain and think about how that's changing. We're no longer going to the shops as much as we are. We're now expecting fresh produce delivered to our doorstep in a faster way. We're expecting it to be delivered with freshness, and we're expected to have it delivered there so that we can consume it and use it straight away. So there's been extra pressure on the supply chain too, to adapt to the new world of 2020. And so for us, what does that mean? Well, as Pierre mentioned, we are a global business. We have a team that's spread across the world in multiple countries. We're handling over 50,000 tons of recycled plastic a year annually. And for us to be able to do that, it normally means that we are a team of people on the ground, visiting our suppliers and visiting our customers. And as we've gone through 2020, we've had to adapt. And as Pierre mentioned, we handle over 100 different grades of scrap plastic, both production, industrial, commercial, and consumer waste. And to be able to do that, it's meant that we've had to try and empower the people around us, some of our suppliers and some of our customers, to do some of the work that we would normally do on site alongside them. So what that's meant that, you know, we've had to empower our supply chain partners to go and do some of that work. And to be able to do that, it's meant we've had to have a bunch of tools and assets available for them to be able to go and use, so they could understand the things that we're asking of them to continue to provide that level of certainty. And one of the things that, as a business, I'm really grateful for is that we have invested in these digital assets so that we can have our customers, suppliers, and even everyday consumers access some of them at any time. So these assets, most of them sit on our website. They're available for anyone to look at any time. And we do leverage these with our current suppliers and customers to learn more about plastic, and also to learn more about the systems and the procedures that we need them to follow to enable us to capture the plastic and keep it in a circular supply chain. And that's certainly been challenging through 2020. We've been able to do that because we have had a bunch of digital assets that we've built up over the last few years that have allowed us to continue to work together, train and educate those in our supply chain, because we can't be on site to do the level of sampling and quality control that perhaps we might have been doing under a normal year. So having these digital assets has certainly helped us train those people on our sites to continue to maintain a level of quality that we feel is only acceptable when we want to deliver this level of certainty. So really 2020 for us has been about making sure that we're looking at all the little details and really reflecting on it. Little changes make big things work. And for our own company, that's certainly been the case, that we've had to make little changes to make big things work. And I'm sure that's been the case with all of you out there in all of your businesses when you look at the challenges that we faced through 2020. But there's one thing that's certainly most important that we always think about, and that is to think beginning and not end. And when we think about when we're on site, we're often thinking about the end, but we're looking at it from the beginning. So for us, 2020 has been a year of change. It certainly has been a year of learning to do business in a different way. We're all familiar with the terms of pivot, and that is something that we've had to do as well. But there's one thing that we haven't stopped doing, and that is to be there to provide certainty for our suppliers, customers, and manufacturing partners.
Well, thanks very much for that, Simon, and we'll get back to you in a moment. So my next panelist that I'd like to introduce is Gian Paolo from Italy. And he's been the communications director of Uchima for probably over 15 years now. And that's he's been a man in the industry, in the machinery side of the packaging industry. So he certainly comes with a lot of experience when it comes to supply chain. He's also he handles their communication for their FAIP media group, and as well as any of the various shows around the world. He handles the international Italian pavilions always. But most of all, he's responsible for helping Italian machinery companies. And for us that are in the packaging industry, we know how many of our packaging machinery, equipment and so on comes from Italy. But most of all, I have to add, Gian Paolo, and that is that he runs a jazz festival. So maybe you'll give us a bit of a jazz show right at the end. Gian Paolo, over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Pierre. Thanks for the invitation. So as Pierre said, we will speak about jazz music. No, I'm joking. I will try, as Pierre said, I work in Uchima. You mostly all know Uchima is the Association of the Italian Packaging Machinery Manufacturers. We export machinery all over the world, and around 1/4 machines sold is Italian. So 25% of the machines installed all over the countries are Italian. We are in times of new normality, as we used to say in these days. So what we try and what I'll try is to give you an overview on what we think is going to happen in the next 3 years in this industry. I'll try to be as short as I can. So if we go with the first slide, we will see which is something maybe, let's say, yeah, thank you, that everyone is expecting, but in the next 2 years, the industry that will have the biggest growth, if we can speak about big, it's the pharma industry. You see that all our forecasts are very moderate. So we see, and you can see it in the next slide, that this industry was used to have a very big growth, while we forecast that we will be growing only of 0.1%. Speaking compared to 2019, where the world market of packaging machinery worth 45 billion euro. You see that Asia remains the country, the big region, the continent where the most machinery will be sold. I would say Asia and not Africa, as you see numbers, because the percentage of growth in Africa, of course, is bigger, but as we all know, the numbers are a little bit different. Then we try to make a picture of which are the materials that will be more used in the next 2 years. Before COVID, we all know that we have been bombed by the plastic issue, and so we were curious of seeing how and if COVID may have an impact on the perception of consumer about various materials and plastic in particular. And as we see in the next slide, flexible plastic and PET bottles will still be the kings of the market. Most of the package sold and distributed will be made into these two materials. And as you see in the next one, plastic remains for a huge percentage the most used material for packagings, followed of course by the others. But this is something that personally a little bit surprised me, because the difference between plastic and the second one is very high. Talking about sector, where are all these packaged sand and produced, you can see in the next one that, of course, the main market remains globally Asia, as you see that over 3,000 billion unit product, packaged products, almost 45% are shipped or produced in Asia, while Europe remained the second in the second row. So this is a very let's say quick picture, but at last I would like, as Pierre asked me, to tell you something about how our companies and the packaging machinery companies react to COVID and in which way they manage to keep close to their clients even though they could not travel. First thing to say, as we call the customer assistance 4.0, considering that thanks to the investment made in the last year in digitalization, IoT, our companies managed to serve clients even in these hard times. Next slide, you see that machinery already before COVID had already been remotely controlled, and so could be our companies could make a first assistant on the machine installed all over the world. But with COVID, we made a step forward, as you see in the next one. The remote, our companies managed to make via internet, something which is very important for people who buy machine, which is called FAIP, so the factory acceptance test, which is a kind of test you do to the machines before shipping them to the client. Usually in the past, clients were used to come to Italy to eat some good food and check if the machine was working properly. Now that they can only maybe eat Italian food in different places, but not Italy, at least we managed to allow them to see the machine working, and so they could give the okay to the machine to be shipped. Another step, which is in the next slide, is that they manage also to do the site acceptance test, which is I send the machine to clients, and then I check it out with remote controlling, which is a kind of improvement for both supplier and customer. And we believe that all these new technology, of course, will be used even in the next months when we hopefully will be able again to meet and travel. Of course, and this is the last slide, our companies didn't, let's say, try to do physical assistance where possible. Even now, they are sending Italian technicians and engineers all over the world trying to cope with all the laws or use the local staff, because I would say a good number of Italian companies, as you all know, have branches all over the world, so they manage to give a good assistance to clients. And of course, companies like us, we are doing now, use also and keep using all these webconf and chat booths in order to give their best assistance to clients. So this is what I wanted to pass and inform you about. So thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Gian Paolo, and I will come back to you in a moment. Our next panelist that I'd like to introduce is Alan Adams. So Alan is with Sealed Aircraft. Some of you folk might know their brand. name out there, very involved in the packaging industry, especially from a sustainability perspective. And obviously that then flows down into the supply chains as well. And we'll soon hear about that and that involvement that he has in that area. But he has a certain passion for packaging, that I know, and certainly focusing on things like food waste and damage reduction. It'll be interesting to hear what he has to say regarding damage reduction in the supply chains, but we'll tackle that in a moment. He looks after the Asia Pacific region, but most of all is that Alan is always available for us to use him on panels like this. And because of his knowledge, experience, and expertise in the field, helps us gain such valuable input. So Alan, thanks very much, and over to you.
Thanks, Pierre. Thanks very much for this opportunity. Look, what an exciting time to be involved in the packaging industry. You know, I don't think we've ever seen such an opportunity for change, acceleration of change, innovation, and adaptation. So truly exciting. And I think that's really around two things which, you know, you've heard from Simon and Gian Paolo talking about in terms of both the end of life of packaging and the noise around that, but also the impact on supply chains of the COVID pandemic. So what I want to do is talk specifically about some impacts on the meat supply chain in this short presentation. Look, it hit really hard and fast for the meat industry. The meat industry ships a lot of product around the world by sea freight. And the moment the pandemic hit China and impacted ports in China, we felt it straight away with many boats, containers of meat stopped immediately. So food in transit was stopped in its tracks and export programs stalled for a period of weeks. Ports became clogged, planned harvest and food and supply chains needed to look for additional outlets. So product that's already packed needed to pivot and look to see whether there are other outlets or other markets that products could be shipped to. At the same time, as the pandemic spread, we saw an enormous slowdown in international flight traffic. And while this impacted, you know, all of us meaningfully at home with stopping our holiday travels and our business travels, one of the unseen impacts of that is that the premium export supply chain was broken, almost disappeared overnight. So premium exports of meat products around the world lost that channel as well. And then as the impacts spread further into processing facilities, we saw those impacts hitting us at staffing. Up and down the supply chain becomes impacted. Abattoirs in many areas faced some sorts of closures or at least reductions in throughput. And around the world, supply chain staff become impacted and market needed to move, to pivot and to adapt to cover these service gaps. Beyond supply chain, we saw another whole series of impacts from consumer behavior. So food service feels that impact immediately with large food service markets like Korea, China, most of Southeast Asia are impacted heavily. And there's a really big consumer behavior change then as people move from typically eating out in large volumes in a high proportion of their daily or weekly meals to needing to cook at home. We see supermarket shelves are decimated for that reason as people shift to eating from home, but also in some markets, developed markets, panic buying. So you see empty shelves everywhere, and I think many countries were impacted heavily. Social interaction patterns are interrupted. The type of meals and outings for families are interrupted. So what does that mean? We needed very quickly new food formats, new food channels, and adaptation in the supply chain to meet those needs. And at the same time, The desperation from a cost and environmental perspective is to minimize food waste, to not lose this food along the way. All of this, or many of these factors, were behind the absolutely enormous explosion in e-commerce. Virtually overnight, a new channel for a whole series of products is born. Whole categories of the population that had previously been slow adopters of e-commerce become rapidly engaged with e-commerce, and unprecedented volumes are delivered. You know, I saw a stat that I read recently where Singapore Post alone posted a 52% volume growth in e-commerce parcels in just one quarter in Q2 this year. So that expansion into whole new products then requires new packaging formats, new supply chain formats to deliver those. And so new opportunities are created. Fresh produce and temperature sensitive products are now looking to travel down a supply chain that they typically had not been in heavily before. Food was creeping into e-commerce, but not in a massive way. This accelerated it dramatically. And you see the explosion of new products and innovations, and here's just one of those. Development of a product called TempGuard, a solution that fits inside a traditional carton, but provides high-level EPS quality level temperature assurance and temperature protection for fresh produce. So it survives the supply chain and survives sitting on someone's doorstep until it's taken into the home. And at the same time addressing that challenge around the explosion of materials heading out into the world, out into the network of consumers, a recycled content solution. I pull this up because I think it really touches on those impacts that we saw around the need for e-commerce and the need for protection and a new style. So that pivoting in this industry has made this period incredibly busy, but really, really exciting. And I think that the major impact of all of this is that the acceleration and growth of new channels has been developed virtually overnight, where we were seeing small percentage gains and we were going to get there over a period of years. Now we're there in a period of weeks. Back to you, Pierre.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Alan. There were a couple of slides there that certainly leads me into some questions, but let's just get Gian Paolo on board and Simon on board. And while they're coming on, I'm going to put the first question to you, Alan. In the early stages of your presentation, it was a very sad scene, very striking scene. You had those containers there on the wharf standing and no forklifts riding around. And you know as well as I know, when you see containers down at the wharf, there's a lot of activity. There was zero activity happening in your slide. A couple to that, I've seen these aeroplane deserts where many airplanes, yeah. So what has this meant to businesses like yourselves? And I know there are many others that are like Sealed Air, probably not as good as Sealed Air, I guess, but there are other suppliers, you know. How have you coped from a supply chain perspective?
Look, I think not just Sealed Air, but everybody within the industry. And in many ways, I've felt really empowered and enthusiastic and proud in many ways of the way the industry has adapted to deal with this situation. You know, sometimes the pressure of these sorts of major challenges gives rise to the fastest adaptation, the fastest reactions, in some ways, perhaps some really great outcomes that we will continue to use. So that pivoting, you know, words like we're using in our daily language now, like pivot and adapt, have been enormous. And I think that if you had outlined the situation of COVID to the industry as a theoretical exercise, everyone would have said it's not doable. But desperation is the mother of invention. So, you know, it's incredible how fast things have moved. And we have felt it through our organization, and I think throughout the whole industry, where everybody has felt that they need to do what they can, right down to the shop floor, to continue to deliver, to make things work, and to end up ensuring that food still gets to our shelves and we can still, get food in our homes. And yeah, the best way I can summarize it is it's a proud time to feel that effort and what can be done when we all come together.
Yeah. Thank you. Gian Paolo, looking at, not only in Italy, but across Europe, you rely heavily on the supply chain systems to have what you're trying to do and achieve the objectives that Uchima has to achieve. How have you coped for the last 8 months?
As Alan said, I would say that after 8 months, we can say that we coped quite well, I would say. But of course, I think there are the times in the last 10 years or 15 years, because it was something so much unexpected that I would say the first month was companies were just shocked. Even though, let's say that as far as Italy is concerned, we know that we went in lockdown at the beginning of March, but as Uchima, we managed to push and do a logistic action with the government to consider the packaging supply chain as essential for the national and international economy. And strangely, they accepted it. And so officially companies were open, so they could run their business, make assistance, send machines, and so on and so forth. Theoretically, as I was saying, because then as far as you were, you open to or need to cross the border, then you had to cope with the other nation legislation. So that's why companies try to push up and, as Alan said, push forward, I would say, some innovation that were linked to IoT digitalization that were, let's say, on the page, but were not really ready to be delivered to the market. So they made an extraordinary effort and managed to make even the clients understand whole technological possibility linked to the machine, because we all know that, of course, digitalization, especially for the workers within the production line, is something that until now they didn't like too much, because, there is always the
Paolo, we've lost connection to you. I'm going to jump straight to you, Simon, because your industry is often an industry that I wouldn't say forgotten, but it's sort of on the periphery, and we should
works and it's
pay more
needed.
Sorry, Gian Paolo, you dropped out completely there. Probably for about 30 seconds of your last discussion point.
Yeah, I was just saying that the COVID pandemic demonstrate that the combination of human and technology is not an opposition, but it's a let's say positive interaction, because only machine could not, or technology could not solve the problem of let's say lockdowns, and on the other hand, let's say workers alone without the remote assistant could not cope with it. So that it was a virtual combination.
Okay, Simon, I'm going to move back to you on that question. In that, certainly from a global perspective, from a World Packaging Organization perspective, sustainability and recycling is very, very on the forefront of our minds. However, during COVID-19, in the early stages when there were a lot of countries that were in lockdown, and you know, I'm asking you, look at it from a global perspective. Many went into lockdown in terms of countries, and therefore there was a lot of manufacturing not happening, which would affect your supply chains hugely. How did you cope?
Yeah, it's a very good point, Pierre, because I think there's a couple of things that shifted at the same time. Like Alan mentioned as well, you know, we've seen the way consumers and e-commerce has grown significantly during COVID-19. You know, we're delivering essentially more packaging to the home. So we're essentially, as consumers, needing to recycle more at home. And then when you look at it through the entire supply chain and getting to your point of, you know, when things started shutting down, well, yeah, factories did actually shut down. So that some of the companies that we were supplying recycled products to weren't using them at the same consumption levels as they may have in normal times. And so that pushback comes all the way back down the supply chain to, you know, right back to the curbside, you know, collectors of that material. So 100% it did impact most businesses across the world, but at the end of the day, we all still had to do something with those materials. So you know, what we are seeing globally is, obviously, if you look at the food part of the business, that's going quite strongly. Anyone servicing that food sector, but then when you look at the industrial applications, that has certainly slowed down, and you know, I think the recovery on that side of it may be a lot slower.
Yeah. Can you touch on the material recycling facility aspect as well? I just want the listeners to get some input or idea what the impact on those were across the world.
Yeah, so from what I, you know, again, we haven't been able to get to all the normal facilities that we would during this time, but speaking to most of the facility operators, there's certainly been, you know, higher volumes of certain materials. They're also seeing a higher volume of contamination in the recycling bins, simply because we're at home more, we're consuming more. And, you know, I guess if I kind of put an Australian spin on it, you know, here we've got a transition to a new labeling system, which is making it easier for consumers to know what to do with those products when they do have them at home. But, you know, internationally, obviously, there are issues with, you know, an increase in some contamination in the recycling supply chain that gets into those material recovery facilities. So there's more work to be done in those facilities to ensure that they're producing the same clean, good quality commodities that can be reused back in the supply chain.
So then, Alan, in terms of your area, you know, would Simon supply recycled material into your facility, and how would that affect you, a recycled material, or are you only using virgin material?
Today in the food contact, so our business is really exposed to two broad scales of material of business, if you know, two broad areas, e-commerce and direct food packaging, particularly food packaging that needs protection, you know, meat, dairy, and fresh produce. So I think one of the world's challenges is volumes of viable content for plastics that are direct food contact. It is one of the biggest challenges. You know, with most of us and large brand owners having commitments to 2025 recycled content percentages, to me, that's potentially the largest challenge on the 2025 pledge of, you know, being recyclable, including recycled content. Being recyclable, collected and meaningfully recovered in some way is quite well down the path for most products, but recycled content is more challenging. In the e-commerce area, we do use quite a lot of recycled materials into, for example, that product I showed earlier, which is full of shredded newspaper to give it the thermal properties and to give it the protection capabilities. From a materials flow point of view, I don't think that we saw any key impacts. A little bit, as Gian Paolo spoke about, one of the things we did very early, and I think that those that were on top of their game in the industry very quickly went to government, went as high as necessary to point out that these are essential supply chain participants, and we need the materials to flow so that we can keep e-commerce going and we can keep putting food on supermarket shelves. So I don't think we saw any heavy materials impacts. Would be my my key thoughts on that.
Gian Paolo, the one question that's been on my mind for a long time, and you're the right man to answer it. We should have had Interpack this year in May. It never happened. Whether it will happen in February, well, I guess we'll still see that. Now, someone in your industry or your type of industry, you rely heavily on expos, exhibitions across Europe and elsewhere across the world. How are you? We don't know if the pandemic is finishing end of the year. You know, the year finishes. That doesn't mean the pandemic will finish. You know, it's not to say it will finish in 31 December. So what are you, because you once more for this element of Uchima, what are you going to do if this pandemic continues next year?
This is the mother of all questions, Pierre.
That's why I asked you.
Actually, I mean, the only thing I can say with, and I'm quite convinced about it, that we can do all forms of digital promotion or meetings on conf calls, but nothing could substitute trade shows. Physical trade shows, I mean, because we know that even now we can do anything on the web. The human exchange, so the chatting in a booth or describing a technology is so much more worth than all sophisticated technological tools. I would say, especially for Italians that are used to, gesticulate, use all the body to express themselves, even if speaking about technology. So to get straight to the point and answer your question, we, at the moment, we are not planning any alternative to trade shows. Even because at the moment companies are not in the mood of doing something different, or but we, even though we are not planning, we are working on it. So we will. We are testing some new possibilities, and we will make deliver to the industry in a few months if pandemic still is still there, the new year.
I'm going to come back to a string you've left there that I'd like to take on when I come back to you for another question still related to this area, because I know there are lots of listeners that are quite interested about this element of expos and exhibitions. So I'll park that now and I'll come back to you. Simon, this is one that I'm really waiting to challenge you on this. In the pandemic, we have seen, and Alan alluded to it, that they had this e-commerce aspect. There are more courier services running around the place than ever before. More product, I'm being told more product around the world is being packed than ever before. So the open markets for food, veggies and fruit is not at the same level as it used to be. There's more packaging happening. So there's more packaging going into the waste stream. And that's your baby. What are you going to do about handling this increase?
Yeah, well, I guess, you know, you know, Alan alluded to as well. I mean, there's a couple of elements to this too, and there is a bit of supply chain pressure as well between, you know, the use of prime, you know, I'll just, sorry, go back a step. Like Alan did allude to, you know, there is a bit of pressure in supply chain, you know, to be able to deliver the certainty that food manufacturers need to increase the level of recycled content in their packaging, and there needs to be some more, you know, technical work that's done in that area. You know, I think you could safely say that we're kind of there with rPET, we're there with HDPE, but a lot of work still to be done around polypropylene. And then on the flip side of that, there is that kind of pressure in supply chain with cost of, you know, supplementing some of the recycled resins, like rPET has traditionally been more expensive than virgin rPET, and there's a little bit of pressure in the marketplace now where we're seeing some supplementation of virgin or prime material back into that packaging. So I guess there will be more packaging on the market. Being able to collect it, well, you know, we need to adapt as well, and so that means we've got to have better collection systems. If I speak a little bit about Australia and what we're seeing in parts of Europe, up in Scotland, we've got container deposit schemes on bottles. I honestly think that they should be extended to some other packaging types, because that's one way to control it. But clearly we've got to get better at educating consumers about it, making sure our collection systems are in place and functioning properly to be able to collect all that material. And then, like Alan said, the biggest challenge is actually being able to then convert that back into a resin that can go back into those very products. So there's no easy solution to the product, to the problem. We do need to collaborate to get a solution, but it is going to take a multitude of steps to get on top of it.
Okay. Alan, every time I come to ask you a question, I'm very envious, because your office, I know, overlooks Bells Beach down in the southern part of Australia. And for those who don't know, Bells Beach is the mecca, one of the meccas of Australian surfing spots. I want to now focus on you. This e-commerce that I was mentioning a moment ago to Simon, and I know you guys are in that space, this has increased enormously. Has that impacted your Sea on Air and other businesses in a similar space? And how are you going to cope next year?
Yeah, good questions. And really positive ones, actually, because obviously being part of an industry that's growing, these are the kinds of challenges most people like to have. Perhaps before I jump into that, I just wanted to comment on Simon's question just before. One of the things that I think is great about the industry is that while in the heart of the pandemic for a short number of weeks, maybe 2 or 3 in March, there was a bit of a stall in thinking around sustainability of packaging, but it was not long at all. Everybody's back on the programs, the projects, the drive to get better outcomes for packaging and better sustainable environmental outcomes across the board. And you know that's what I'm mainly plugged into. So, you know, I'm proud of the industry in that regard, and I think we are continuing to drive good results, you know, from efficiency through the equipment design, you know, that Gian Paolo's, you know, members are involved in, through the innovation at the end of the chain, you know, from Simon's organization, and design from at the front end from ours, you know, thinking about the beginning. But in terms of your question around volumes in e-commerce, e-commerce is, I believe, here to stay. I think the step change and lift in volumes is a step change that will stay. I don't think we're going to see the pandemic solved and us drift back to where we were. So you're quite right. There is a large amount of packaging ending up at consumers' homes. And I know this, my recycling bin fills faster than ever. I think that the solutions have to come from everyone being involved. We need to educate consumers better on the correct behaviours. We need to develop materials, develop more recycling, and develop more demand for sustainable recycled products. You know, what Simon wants is sustainable demand for materials. And in my view, the single biggest thing we need to do with all of this, we need to give used packaging a value. Simon spoke about container deposits. I don't know that that's the exact model for everything, but it is obvious where container deposits for certain types of containers exist, you do not see them in the street. So I do believe that providing value, designing in a value to the waste material is critical, and that value has to be recognized by everybody, including the consumers that are receiving it. And I think that's potentially one of our biggest challenges.
Gian Paolo, my opening statement to you is turn back to local supply and manufacture. With that in mind, what we have found across the world, and I don't think Europe is any different, and in particular, I don't think Italy is any different either, in that there's been a trend to import certainly from countries around sort of Southeast Asia area. We have found that folk are sourcing cheaper supply, and so they're importing. And with the supply being cut off for a period during COVID-19, especially in the earlier stages, and the local, when I say local European manufacturers maybe started, doing their own thing again. How has this impacted on the machinery supply business? Your area where you supply new machineries into these companies, and they're stopping all that because they're gearing up their old machines again that used to run 10 years ago.
Okay, I lost you for a while, but I tried to answer. I think I got the point. If not, please do something. Before answering your question, I would like to take out some points that Alan gave about e-commerce, saying that, speaking about value of packaging, I think these months gave customers again a value for packaging, because even linked to e-commerce, because before COVID, everyone was talking about over-packaging, waste, and so on. While some of the peculiarities, like the safety features of packaging with the pandemic, has grown again to the jump again to the customer attention and new importance. Another issue the industry altogether should be addressing, as we discussed during our International Forum on Green Packaging last February in Italy, is the international legislation. Because, of course, we can do sensibility on customer within the supply chain, but if every country address the problem with different legislation,
right down there. Okay, and then where to in 2021? Where to for you guys in a COVID scenario? And let's jump back to Gian Paolo. Can you hear me, Gian Paolo? You dropped out again for a little while there. So I think we lost again the last paragraph of your conversation.
I was just coming back to your question, saying that at the moment, I don't think that the supply chain, if I got your question was how pandemic, or if pandemic changed the supply chain, let's say with preferring, let's say, end user or brand owners choosing local manufacturers instead of international one, as Italians or German, just to give the two world leaders. At the moment, I would say that this didn't affect too much the industry, because as Alan and Simon were saying, here we are dealing with legislations on like food content for as far as food is concerned, or pharma and cosmetics, which needs high level of technology, safety machines, and so on and so forth. So we don't see a real impact on, let's say, international selling of machines. Of course, it happened and it will keep happening that let's say less value machines within the line will remain for local manufacturers, or that pandemic may boost cooperation between big international companies and local companies to cope in case or in periods like these ones.
Thank you. So, Alan, coming back to that question, and I know you've been thinking about it while Gian Paolo was talking, but I want to add another piece just to confuse you, and that is with an extended life scenario, with an extended life form of packaging added to the question I asked you.
So 2021, I think that it will be in many ways the same as it has always been, but different at the same time. So what I mean by that is we will continue to focus on delighting customers. So making them have the experiences they want, delivering the experiences they want, and doing it efficiently. So doing it with minimized resources, minimized waste, which means, you know, extended shelf life for fresh produce so that it can travel further through supply chains, survive longer, and do it more efficiently. But when I say delight consumers, today delighting consumers may well include good end-of-life outcomes for the packaging as well. So we're all linked. I think I'll leave you with those thoughts. Okay.
Simon, you know, you're a family man, and I know down there in the southern part of Australia where you live, that you guys were in lockdown, and you went into a second wave, you were in lockdown again. What changed in Victoria, your state or your province? How did that, what changed in terms of the outlook of the consumers?
Yeah, I think the lockdown period, I'm going to be very open and talk about my personal experience here, Pierre, because I think that's the way to try and cover that question is, you know, like everyone at the start of the lockdown, it was probably like a bit of a novelty for everyone. This has never happened before. So, you know, people probably just went about things the way they did, and, oh, we're at home, we'll just, you know, have a few days off and whatever else. And then the further the lockdown went on, I think the reality set home that, you know, we were here to stay, and these disruptions to our daily life were certainly here to stay. And the things that I saw around me was obviously, you know, going to the shops, people were shopping very differently within the community. I would see a lot more people out walking around the community. And then, you know, I guess the further the lockdown's gone on, and we're still in a lockdown here in Melbourne, Australia at the moment, I think it's led to a little bit of frustration amongst people about being, you know, locked down and not being able to get out and have that interaction within the community. So I think, you know, for us and my family, it's certainly been a big change. I've really enjoyed working from home. I must say I have really enjoyed that. Homeschooling the kids has been great. And the first time ever, I haven't traveled at all this year other than in January and February before the virus took hold. And I mean, that's made a massive difference to my family, to be home more, to be at home every night and not be traveling as much. So yeah, look, it's been a roller coaster ride, but one of the things I've tried to look at with the lockdown is, and I've had this conversation with my kids and my family, look guys, what do we want to get out of this? What can we achieve as a family so that when we get to the end of this journey and we are able to have all these freedoms, what have we achieved together? What have we learned together? And how have we improved as individuals and as a family?
Yeah, and you were talking about working from home, and I'm glad to see that you wear a jacket at home. That's great in your home office there, Simon. That's great. I'm going to put the similar question to you, Gian Paolo, because I know Italy went through a tough time. You guys hit hard in March, in April. We were watching the figures and the statistics, and it really was, you know, I'm sure it was very bad and very shocking for you guys in Italy. And I'm sure that it affected many of your friends and maybe even family members and so on. And now you're into it again. So it's really tough. What has been the effect on you as a family man as well, and the impacts on the Italians as in general?
So let's say that luckily none in my family and friends was affected by a pandemic, and even among our let's say office colleagues or friends, and we were quite lucky. But of course the situation was very tough in March, and is becoming tougher now because people do not want to enter lockdown again. So we are trying our best, I would say, as let's say single person, to do all we can to protect ourselves and the others. But of course, it has changed a bit our attitude, because now you walk on the street and check out with your eyes how far is the person walking around close to you, and think about going out for dinner because maybe there would be too many people in the restaurants you want to go and you prefer not to go. Like, it is affecting normal attitudes of everybody, and so also the way also of approaching the let's say the market as a customer. Then what will happen in the next week, we don't know. I mean, the fear is that not only Italy, but Europe will go again in something very similar to a general lockdown. But who knows, I would say.
Yeah. Well, you know, we're up on the hour, and it's been a wonderful hour spent with you gentlemen, and also Alan. I know you had to jump into another webinar elsewhere. I know time is tight for both of you. We and the WPO certainly appreciate what you brought to this webinar. This is our final webinar. It's going to be sad not doing a webinar next month. We've been doing them for 5 months now. But thanks so much to you in Australia, Simon. All the very best, and I hope you guys don't have any more waves, and you're right out of this wave now. And Gian Paolo, you guys in Italy, all the very best. And I hope that we'll be able to see you at the next Interpack. Thank you for your time and your effort.
Thank you very much.
Many thanks to you too, Pierre, and also to the panel for your contributions and the lively discussion. I think everyone will agree that today's session has been both informative and engaging. And if anyone would like to get copies of the presentations that were made today, please drop us a line at propac@informa.com. Also, this session and all the previous sessions have been recorded and are available on our YouTube channel, so please have a look at those. Furthermore, if today's session has given you an appetite for more interactive discussion covering the latest topics affecting the industry, then I can heartily recommend that you take a look and sign up to the Global Packaging Forum that the ARP are running online for us as part of Propac Asia. Sessions are on today and tomorrow, so please head over to the Propac Asia or ARP websites and get registered for those. At this point, all that remains for me to say is a very big thank you once again to today's panelists and all our previous panelists throughout the series. Moreover, a special thanks to Pierre and Nerida, without whom the series would not have been possible, nor as successful and as engaging as it's been. It's been a real pleasure working together with you all on this project. Also, a big thanks to all our attendees over the 5 events. So at this point, I'd just like to say thank you, and please stay safe, and goodbye.